Welcome back to News at 8. The month of October is regarded as Transport Month, but as South Africa marks the occasion, people living with disabilities still do not have access to public transport. They say they're usually told there's no space or simply ignored by drivers. To discuss this, we're now joined in studio by a representative from the National Council for Persons with Physical Disabilities in South Africa, Lubabalo Mbeki. Lubabalo, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Tabile, and good evening to SABC viewers.
Now, Lubabalo, how can you currently assess the status of people living with disabilities in South Africa?
Well, generally, people with disabilities in South Africa are facing a number of challenges. Just for a background, I come from the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, which is a national organization lobbying for the rights, but also we have a number of services that we offer. But generally, coming across different areas on transport, on employment, accessibility, there are challenges on accessibility, awareness about disability, also challenges on attitudes. Transportation, I'm happy that you're mentioning that there are a number of challenges also regarding transportation. Generally those are the challenges that South Africans are facing with regards to people with disabilities.
Now, we've been covering the Oscar Pistorius case quite extensively, and we know that this trial has brought about the plight of people living with disabilities to the forefront. Now, what's your take on the notion that state institutions don't have the special facilities that people with physical disabilities require?
Well, obviously, as an organization, we do not at this stage have a say on the Oscar Pistorius case. It's all in the court, but generally we believe on access for all in different areas of accessibility, on built environment, on transportation, information and communication. And accessibility is not always a one-fits-all thing. It depends on different types of disabilities and the extent to where people how people are disabled. So generally, that's our comment, but we don't have a one-sided view regarding the Oscar Pistorius case.
Now, what impact do you think this trial will have on people with disabilities? Do you think it has strengthened or weakened the cause? Perhaps it has even educated people by dispelling some misconceptions about people with disabilities. What's your view?
Well, again, this is my personal view. The case has created a lot of indications regarding people with disabilities. At some point, it has created negative attitudes or maybe perceptions about people with disabilities. And at some point, it has raised some issues regarding people with disabilities, which people had never talked about. So that's our view on that.
Now, would you say that people with disabilities sometimes find themselves still fighting for basic human rights and basic necessities in the country?
Yes, of course. People with disabilities are facing a large number of challenges when it comes to basic services. And again, it goes to access. How do we access our basic services regarding the facilities that the public services are having, on built environment, on transportation? How do you go to the public service facility when there's a big challenge on public transportation in the system? And it sadly impacts a lot number of people with disabilities, especially in the rural areas.
Now, can you take us through some of the most common challenges that people with disabilities face on a day-to-day basis? Maybe you can even use yourself as an example, how you cope as an amputee, but also what are those challenges that you face that perhaps people out there don't understand?
Well, I think, again, it depends on the individual. But I think people with disabilities, awareness and support begins to the people who are immediately surrounding you. Support from your friends, support from your family, Again, there have been perceptions from the past regarding people with disabilities. So people with disabilities on a daily basis, they have to double their energy to prove themselves as people who are equal. And I think that should be like that. Those are the common challenges that people with disabilities are facing.
Now, just finally, let's look at some of the economic challenges and challenges of, getting employment. What's the struggle there? Is the job market open to people with disabilities, would you say?
First, there's a part on employment equity, which is guided by the status quo. And then I think that is a legislation that is driving employers to open up vacancies for people with disabilities. But again, it creates an impression that employers should employ people with disabilities because they have to and are forced to, and not because they are people who have potential. And also we keep pushing numbers. And at the end, people with disabilities are placed in workplaces that are not well accommodated for people with disabilities. And also we keep placing people with disabilities to score them in our BE scores and also employment equity reports, and we end up having large numbers of people with disabilities in entry-level positions. And we don't see, as according to the Act, people with disabilities being placed in all different types of levels until the senior management. And of course, we would like to see people with disabilities being educated so that we can make sure that they fill those higher positions.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us on News at 8.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.